Hello friends, welcome to episode 19 of InsurTech Talk by InsurTechLA. My name is Gilad Shai, and in this episode my guest is JD April, an Executive Vice President at Slayton Search Partners. Our talk is on the war for talent and new skills. Please join my conversation with Jay. This episode is sponsored by Exactuals, perfecting insurance payments and the data driving them. Here is a guy which is not an insurance agent, not an underwriter, not a founder of an InsurTech startup, but one of the people that make sure that insurance companies operate by bringing the right talent. And you've been doing that for many, many years. So let me, start, as you say, off the bat. What's going on in the industry? 2020 has been a hard year. A very difficult year for all of us.
Yep. Yeah, it has been a challenging year, to say the least. What's been fascinating to me is the legacy carriers that I work with across the life and the health and the P&C space have been able to pivot, and they've adjusted well to this change. All of them have remote workforces. Their productivity is just as strong as it used to be. And business is just as good as it always has been. So it has been a challenging year in many, many ways. However, to the credit of the industry, they've seemed to adjust and are operating just fine right now.
What does it mean after we're doing this digital transformation?
Yeah.
What does it mean for the new skills that need to come in?
Yeah, so from my point of view, I haven't seen the huge cuts that maybe some other folks have seen. And I work with some of the biggest carriers in the country. Now, there have been a couple of large carriers that are changing their business model, and therefore they're adjusting their workforce. However, I would say the overwhelming majority of legacy carriers, the incumbents, really have not gone through massive layoffs that we might have seen in 2008 or the last recession that we went through. So to be quite honest with you, the changes that are being driven and therefore changing the workforce are really attributed to exactly what you said. It's more focused on innovation, driving change in the business model. The pandemic really has accelerated change across every single line of insurance, and the changes in the workforce has really been driven by innovation, bringing in new skill sets to address the digital changes that insurance companies have to embrace to successfully compete.
What we've seen in COVID, that was such an amazing catalyst for the digital transformation and how insurance companies changed their operation.
Well, first off, I think hats off to two functions in any insurance company or any company across the globe right now that really ultimately had to step up in this environment. The human resources function and our friends in the IT function. They had to turn on a dime and get their workforce to coming to centralized offices to work together, to going basically 100% remote. And that's been a super challenge. And to their credit, the majority of them have been able to support their companies. I think ultimately where companies are right now is that A, they're figuring out what is their model going to look like when we all return. B, when we return, is it everyone back to the office, or is it only a certain segment of employees? Or C, is the future of work now, right? And is it a virtual first approach? I have a friend of mine who is the CEO of a health insurance company, and he just joined the board of DocuSign. And they just announced that they are going virtual first, where they will allow their employees to work from anywhere at any time that they want to. So to be quite honest with you, I think the future is very, very bright. I think ultimately, especially for the workforce, I think ultimately companies and employees are still wrestling with those questions. What does a corporate culture look like if it's 100% virtual, right? Do employees still have to come into an office to be productive? Do you still need face-to-face interaction with employees in an office to spark, ideas and creativities? And I think we're just in the first inning of that game right now. But I think this is going to be a really challenging, but kind of a neat time to be in the workforce.
Frankly, I prefer to go to the office, or at least a hybrid combination. I don't know. What about you? Do you prefer to work from home?
So you're talking to someone that's been traveling for 25 years as a retained executive search consultant. And for 25 years, it's been me on an airplane 4 days a week, going to meet clients, going to interview candidates. And while I love that interaction, I realized a couple of years ago that things were changing and we had to figure out digital for ourselves. And I think if you look at the sales function, it's completely changed. For example, I was actually looking at a whole life insurance policy for my family, and I had an agent coming from one of the top 10 insurers to run me quotes. And he kept coming back and forth to my house probably 3 or 4 times because it's a sizable investment to buy a whole life policy that I was considering at the time. And I looked at him and I looked at the way that I was actually when I started my career, I was a life and health and P&C insurance agent. So I sold insurance for a couple of years myself, and this is 25 plus years later, and the agent was using the same technology. It was a pitch book, and coming and having kitchen table meetings in my house. And I think that's changed. And I think there's been, a question of what does insurance distribution look like going forward. And I think the old model is completely changing. I think distribution has to think about selling and servicing policies in a way that they never have before. And I think incumbents are just starting to right now wrestle with how does that ultimately look, right? How do we support our distribution force when the ways of selling are changing? And again, I think we're just in the early stages of understanding that.
So you spent 25 years jumping on a plane and traveling.
Yeah,
And
give or take. Yeah.
no, that's impressive. Pre-COVID, I've done so for 3 years, mainly go to meet customers, investors, the various, let's call it conference engagements that I had. Once we go to normal, yes, I will go back to the office, go on a plane, more than happy to do so.
Yeah. That for me, I don't have to. I'm happy to go meet with clients when they want to meet with me. I think it's important. I've got personal relationships with business partners that I've worked with for years. But the old way of developing business, right? Whether it's for me, a retained search consultant, or for an insurance agent that is in the commercial line space, has changed. And I think incumbents, folks that are our age and above, have to learn a new way to sell. I'm telling all the executives that I talk to, and I'm constantly talking to insurance executives, C-level insurance executives from across all lines of insurance. And the one thing that I'm telling these executives that they have to do is they have to understand personal branding, and they have to understand becoming visible. Because just like insurance companies are figuring out digital for themselves, I think executives have to figure out digital for themselves, because I don't believe we're going back to the way that we used to do business. I really think that that has changed forever. I think companies are realizing they can save a lot of money without putting sales forces on airplanes to go out and have a meeting and stay in a hotel in New York and go out for a great dinner, when they can do the majority of their meetings virtual and still drive sales. And to be quite honest with you, if you would have told me in March of last year that I would have been as busy as I am during a global pandemic, I would have laughed at you. And I've invested a lot of time and effort in creating my own digital profile. And that has really allowed me to continue to actually double my business that I have in the past years. And I think everyone in every function, whether they're in an insurance company or any other consulting organization or business organization for that matter, they have to embrace the new ways, right? I mean, just like we're not going into retail stores anymore, right? I remember my dad when I was young said, "Who needs a phone in their car?" Right? Think about that. That's all changed, and I think you either adapt or you die. Isn't talked about enough, but I get calls from C-level insurance executives on a regular basis. Is they want to understand, how to win the war for talent. They realize that just because everyone's working from home right now does not stop their initiatives.
And thank you for bringing that up. This is a great follow-up question because they need to compete. If it's technology, they need to compete against the technology companies.
Absolutely right. And so the profile that incumbent insurance companies are looking for in terms of talent has changed. While they are still looking for traditional insurance roles, underwriting and claims and finance and actuarial, with the innovation that's being driven across every single line of insurance, they need different talent. They need talent that understands artificial intelligence, that understands machine learning, that understands digital, that understands direct to consumer, a whole new set of skills that, quite frankly, don't exist right now in the insurance industry. And a number of my clients are we're having conversations saying, if we need this type of talent, we need to go outside of the insurance industry, right? And then if you have a traditional incumbent insurer that has been used to having all the talent have to relocate to their corporate headquarters, and they realize that if their corporate headquarters is not in Chicago, New York, or San Francisco, and that talent is there, they have to figure out ways to engage that talent, recruit them to their company, and realize that these employees have choices. And they don't have to go to work for your company. And so insurance companies are realizing that, they have to be a little bit more flexible. They have to get with the times right now and realize that, the war for talent is over and talent has won. And talent is ultimately going to make the decision who they go to work for. So they have to change 300 years of doing business in the old way to attract and retain that talent that they need to allow them to compete in the future. And on a positive note for insurance carriers, once they understand that and once they buy into that, they realize that they can access talent that they may not have been able to get before because they don't need that talent to relocate to Milwaukee or Birmingham, Alabama, or Portland, Maine, for example. And it's a big shift with how insurance companies are looking at the talent they need and how they can acquire that talent.
Now let's talk. Now you're usually working with executives and helping to recruit executives. Are you also helping to recruit those special skills? Let's call it the director level or even the data scientist that you sort of hinted to.
Yeah, I absolutely am. I mean, I'm looking for talent that we've never looked for traditionally in the past. As I've mentioned, AI, machine learning, digital, direct-to-consumer, customer experience talent. Now, typically, I work at the C-level and one or two levels below that. So I'm looking for the leaders of those particular functions. I'm not looking for the folks that are assistant vice presidents or directors. Typically it's someone that I work for is usually making at a minimum $500,000 to $600,000 all the way up to $3 to $5 million in terms of compensation. And those are the folks that I'm looking for. But that talent that I'm talking about, it's expensive. It's in demand. And quite frankly, they don't understand the insurance industry. So if you go out and you bring someone from outside of the insurance industry, you have to have the ability to translate why it's such an exciting industry to be in. And to be quite honest with you, I think the insurance industry must do a much better job of demonstrating why insurance is such an exciting industry to be in of going forward.
You can always send them to me. I'll be more than happy to explain them how come insurance is so exciting. And being in the space for, I'm only 6 years in the InsurTech insurance space. And I can tell you, I started in InsurTech Los Angeles out of pure passion. Why? Because there is so much good and so much things that you can do. And there are people who've been doing that for longer than I am. So
and to your point, right, doing good. And it's been shown over and over again with studies with young people that are just starting out their career, right? Gen X or Gen Y or Gen Z or whatever they're called now. Let's call them people
Gen X,
that are...
it's us. We are a little bit old.
But Gen Y, the millennials, ultimately, they say over and over again that they want to do good. They want to help people. And to be quite honest, there are few industries that are going to allow them to impact that because it's a mission-driven industry. We're there when people are going through some of the worst events in their life, and we're there to support them. So the insurance industry needs to start communicating with young people that they can come in, join a dynamic, mission-driven industry and do good things while doing fascinating work. And if we do that, we're going to be able to win that war on talent.
You mentioned that you've been recruiting many for C-level and of course the 2 levels that below that, and helping the companies to recruit and identify those leaders. Now, how do you help? And you also mentioned that you help those leaders to find the talent that they need, especially in the new fields. How do you find the right C-level or top talent for the C-level and those leadership roles that know how to work with the new skills that are needed? We mentioned AI, we mentioned all of these guys, but if you've been a C-level in insurance, which means you've been in insurance for at least 20 years, how do they catch up with blockchain? Which I don't like that buzzword, but let's use it as an example.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. There are super talented people all across the insurance industry. There are people that understand that the industry has to change and it has to be disrupted from inside, and they get it. The challenge ultimately is, though, is if you are working with a legacy insurance carrier and they realize that they have to create a customer experience, or they have to start leveraging new technologies to improve the underwriting function, if you will, or to impact the direct consumer strategies. And when they call me up and they start talking about, can you go to our competitors? I have a frank conversation with them. I will tell them, listen, naturally, we're going to look into your competitors to find that talent. That's what we do. However, you have to expand beyond traditional insurance companies and start looking at adjacent financial services companies. Start to look at InsurTech companies. Start to look at consumer products, retail companies, online companies to get that talent because they've been there before. The challenge ultimately is 2 fronts, right? Attracting that talent to the insurance industry that we talked about, because the insurance industry has to do a better job of telling people why it's an exciting industry to get into. But then ultimately making sure your legacy organization, everyone that's in that organization, understands how important it is to allow these people to succeed once they're brought into your organization. Because a lot of time what I've seen is that you get organ rejection. So you will work with a traditional legacy life insurance carrier that's been around for 175 the senior 175 years. The senior management team has been around for a long time. They may be a little bit out of date in terms of understanding why it's important to have great customer experiences, or how distribution is changing. You go out and bring that talent, and they push so hard against those innovation strategies that those people can sometimes be doomed to failure. And it takes a big push from senior management to make sure there's buy-in and success for those initiatives.
I think that the key word in insurance is buy-in. Actually, it's not just insurance, but almost any other big company. You need the buy-in. You need to reach a new status quo and a leader. And I don't want to ask you, that classic question, what makes a great leader? Which I'm sure that you have a great answer for, but the buy-in or reshaping the status quo, it's such an important trait for a leader or a manager, which is different than a leader in a big company. So instead of asking you what makes a great leader or a good manager, how do you recognize or identify someone who can be a good leader and a great manager?
I think there's, it's not one thing. What I do every single day is I learn about very strong talent and what they're doing to be successful. And to be quite honest with you, a big part of it is their track record. Where have they been? What have they done? But understanding the needs of the job that I'm doing a search for, and going out and finding the different skills that might be important, right? For some roles, it's leadership. It's leading a large team, right? And how do you come in, do a talent assessment, look around, make sure that you have the right people in the right seats to make sure the business is successful. Or it can be a head of distribution coming in and looking at their distribution model, and can they come up with new and different ways to engage the customer and sell and service policies in ways that we never have done before, right? So the first inclination is to go out and get a head of distribution from one of your competitors. But then are you getting more of what you've had in the past? And how can I work with my clients to say, this is a different skill set that you may not feel comfortable leading distribution, but if you really want to drive the change that you're talking about, if you want to make sure your organization continues to be competitive, you have to look outside of different skill sets. So it's a combination of many different things. I don't have a magic wand and say you need this to be a great leader. It's all taken in context.
I wish there were a sponsor, but what do you think about, let's say, put it in the frame, the motivation mugs? Tough times don't last, tough people do. Is that still relevant in terms of motivation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got to understand that nothing's easy. And every time you get knocked down, you got to get back up. I mean, heck, I was told a couple of times that I wasn't meant to be in this particular industry that I am. And for some reason, for 25 years, I've never listened to that criticism. I've always gone up, and I realize now as I'm starting to get a little bit older is that I thank God I never listened to those people. I don't listen to folks like that. Right? I ultimately know where I want to go. I know how I'm going to get there, and damn the torpedoes, I am going to get there. Right? And so I think there are challenges that everyone faces in their career, in their personal lives, and it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. And that separates people who are successful from people who are not.
Yeah, grit is so important. No matter if you're entrepreneur, you're a business owner, or working in any other company, you're going to get, there are going to be blows from left and right, small or big, really depends. But standing back up emotionally, it's super important. No, I love it. Now let me sort of shift more to personal stuff. We've been almost a year in sort of a lockdown. How do you manage your time? What is your, I don't know, special sanity routine?
So I manage, it's funny, believe it or not, I'm working harder than I ever have. I'm busier than I ever have. I'm doing more interesting searches than I ever have. And I'm, quite frankly, working longer hours. Literally, now that I'm getting old, I can't sleep anymore. So I usually get up and I start working at 5 o'clock in the morning. Wow. I take some time and I walk my dogs, which is great, and we cook at my house. That's how we alleviate a lot of stress. On weekends, we're always cooking. But my work schedule is, I'll be honest, it is busier than ever. It is more jam-packed. I'm not wasting 2 or 3 hours on an airplane flying to New York or Hartford to meet with clients, and that has been filled up with activities to engage more people, to help more people with their searches for their companies, to build their management team, or taking the time, quite honestly, once or twice a day to talk to executives that are thinking about what's next and how they can move their career along, whether it's leaving their current company, joining another company, or folks that want to get into the InsurTech industry. My days are pretty full, to be quite honest with you, and to be frank, I love it. It's great.
Now, one of the last questions that I ask almost everyone, actually everyone, do you have a recommendation for a favorite show or a book that you saw? Yeah, of course.
So I don't watch much TV. I read. I'm constantly reading. That's for me every night with a book. That is joy for me. And I just finished 400 Years of American Capitalism. And it is fascinating to me to look back at 400 years of where we've been, the brilliant, ingenious people that have built lasting, successful companies, and the impact that they've had on not only the United States, the world. So if I can make a recommendation about a great book, it's 400 Years of American Capitalism. I highly recommend it.
JD April, insurance practice leader of Slayton Search Partners. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's been such an interesting conversation.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Julian.